Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Hannah. We talk about books, chronic illness and life in Amsterdam, and I'm back with one of my most favourite video series to make. This is Books on My Radar, where I share with you upcoming releases for the month, books that have just come out or that are coming out, focusing on literary fiction, translated fiction, memoir and non-fiction books I find interesting. If you like my taste and the books that I mention in my vlogs and my wrap-ups, then hopefully lots of these books will do it for you too. So without further ado, let's dive in. First up, I have Gifted by Suzumi Suzuki. This is published by Scribe on the 24th of October and it's translated. This book follows. In 2008, an unnamed narrator of Gifted is working as a hostess and living in Tokyo's nightlife district. One day, her estranged mother, who's seriously ill, turns up at her door. As the mother approaches the end of her life, the two women must navigate their strained relationship, while the narrator also reckons with the events happening in her own life, including the death of a friend, all under the bright lights of Tokyo's sleepless town. Sharp, elegant prose based on the author's own experience as a sex worker, Gifted heralds the breakthrough of an exciting new literary talent. I really like the idea of seeing a different side to Tokyo. I feel like a lot of the Japanese literature I've read more recently focuses on sort of housewives and middle-class Japanese people, that sort of mundane everyday machinations, which is also very interesting and enjoyable to read, but I like the context of this, and I'm pleased to hear that this is based on the author's own experience of sex work, so I hope the portrayal will be at least accurate. So yeah, really looking forward to seeing what people think of that. Next up, I have The Burrow by Melanie Cheng, published by Text Publishing on the 1st of October. So this one is already out. This follows three different protagonists leading isolated lives in a partially renovated inner city home. They are not happy, but they are also terrified of change. When they buy a pet rabbit for Lucy, and then Amy's mother Pauline comes to stay, the family is forced to confront long-buried secrets. Will opening their hearts to the rabbit help them heal or invite further tragedy? A story of grief and hope with compassion and an eye for detail. Really intrigued by the premise of this, having this little rabbit creature as a mechanism to open up the characters' discussions around things like grief and secrets. Could be a little twee, but also could be an interesting, metaphorical exploration. So that's The Burrow. Up next, we have The Rest of You by May Blue. I believe that's how you pronounce her name. This is, I've never read any of their work before, but I know they are loved. This follows set between London and Ghana in the 1990s. It's published on the 29th of October by Verve. It says, on the cusp of 30, Ghanaian Londoner Whitney was born with a special gift. The massage therapist can sense where her client's trauma lies and heal them. But when Whitney has no idea she is suffering true, tragic events of her youth have left her with a terrible unseen mark. When a dangerous encounter with a man she's dating triggers a wave of fragmented recollections, Whitney embarks on a journey to reclaim her memories and the truth buried deep in her early years growing up in Ghana. Spanning 3 decades and told through the viewpoint of Whitney, her aunts Gloria and Aretha, and their house help, The Rest of You explores what happens when you move through the lacuna of our past. So yeah, it sounds maybe intergenerational in some ways and sort of cross-cultural. I'm interested to see how this book would deal with this gift and this ability to detect trauma. I think done well, that could be, again, an interesting metaphor, but also could be, if half-baked, a little insensitive. So we'll have to see what people feel. Okay, we have the sequel published by Faber on the 24th. This author wrote the plot, which I didn't read, but I have a really vivid memory of my friend Grace reading it. I think he likes to write quite metatextual thriller type novels, and it has only a very short blurb, but it did intrigue me. It says, not many first-time novelists get a profile in the New York Times. Then again, a few first-time novelists come with the backstory of Anna Williams-Bonner, recent bride to the wildly successful writer who took his own life even as his fame was on the ascent. Anna's book is climbing to the bestseller list, but when someone leaves a cryptic note for her at her book signing, she realises not all the attention has been positive. For years, she's been keeping secrets, but what if someone knows the truth? So it could be a little cat and mouse scenario here, and it's described as wickedly entertaining and compulsively readable. And I really sometimes do enjoy writers writing about writers or writers writing about writing. I think that meta level can be, when done well, really fascinating. So yeah, some of this like twigs in my memory a few of the plot points of Yellowface, which is a book I didn't really enjoy, but the thriller type aspect of this definitely is calling to me. Okay, this is a book I'm so excited about. This is Nobody's Empire by Stuart Murdoch. And Stuart Murdoch was, or is, the frontman to Belle and Sebastian, which is a musical act I really enjoy. But this I'm excited about because, unfortunately, Stuart Murdoch has lived with ME, which is one of the conditions I live with, commonly called chronic fatigue syndrome. And he is written an autofiction type book talking about his love of music and his experiences with the illness. I think particularly from a gender point of view, this is really interesting to me because I know ME is often discussed as and it is more prevalent in ABFAB people, but it does also affect cis men. Anyone can get ME, and I think it will be really intriguing to see his perspective on this. So it says, in Glasgow, the early 1990s, Stephen, a musical loving romantic, has emerged from a hospital stay diagnosed with ME, a little understood disease. He meets fellow strugglers for whom the world seems to care less and less, and they form their own support group to navigate their lives. Starting to write songs in a slow and fledgling way, Stephen wakes the possibility of a spiritual and an artistic life. He leaves Glasgow for the mythic warmth of California, and he and his friend Richard float between hostel sofas and park benches. Could this trip offer them both a new beginning? I really struggle sometimes to read literature about ME because it just feels so painful, even compared to all of the other conditions I live with and experiences. Something about reading about ME just I find incredibly difficult. So I'm not sure if I will even get through this book, but I hope some people in my life perhaps will pick it up too. And I know lots of you watching live with chronic illness, so I'd love to hear what you thought of it. Okay, I've got a translated novel out from Book Hug Press. This is called Sugaring Off by Fanny Britt, and it's translated from the French. And I believe this is a Canadian press. So it says, on the surface, Adam and Marion are the embodiment of success, wealthy, attractive, and in love. While holidaying in Martha's Vineyard, Adam surfs into a local woman, Celia. The accident leaves her injured and financially at risk. For Adam and Marion, it opens a fault of loneliness, rage, and desire that's been ignored. Here, Britt abrades the surface layer of our outward personas, delving into the complexity and contradictions of relationship and eviscerating critique of privilege. She asks what's happened when you can no longer play a role in family, couple, or social structure, the friction between pleasure and consequence. Really interested in the way this deals with the dynamic of the accident and how people negotiate those feelings of guilt and disarray caused knowing that you're someone who has harmed someone else irreversibly often. So yeah, I think this storyline could be a really interesting one to explore. Okay, then we have the Volcano Daughters. This cover is unreal. I love the colours of it so much. I want to knit a hat in this pink and blue and green so badly. This is a family saga following two sisters. It says, Gracilia is raised in the shadow of El Salvador's Ilzaco volcano until the day she's taken to the capital city by the country's fearsome and fearsomely superstitious dictator who believes her a muse capable of foreseeing the future. There, Gracilia meets Consuelo, a sister she has never knew existed. She is everything Gracilia is not, volatile, dreamy, and teenage, yet despite the differences, the sisters form an unlikely bond, and when the dictator's brutality is finally unleashed, El Salvador is changed forever. Here they survive the massacre, but most of their community are not so lucky. From San Salvador to Los Angeles, Paris to San Francisco, these sisters create a new future for themselves. But But the story, though, of those left behind is not over yet. Their voices, once just a whimper, shout louder than ever, and we must listen. I don't know if I said this is published by One World. Really like the idea of this spanning across multiple countries, and I really want to read more books from Central America. I'm not sure how much of this is based on like historical accuracy in terms of like comparing the dictatorships and such, but I think it sounds like a really beautiful and enthralling read that could be really unusual. Okay, then we have Beautiful Dreamers by Min Rose Gwyn, published on the 10th. I've never read any of her work, but I believe her previous novel, The Accidentals, has a small cult following. So this is set in the 1950s, and it says, when Memory Feather and her mother Virginia are welcomed back home to the Mississippi Gulf Coast community of Belle Cote by Virginia's childhood friend, Mac, whose verve and energy buoy the recently divorced Virginia to embrace this new chapter. Memory, Mem, is not like other girls. Or, not gonna lie, that's a red flag when someone puts that in a blurb without understanding the irony. She is attuned to the voices of plants and animals and is missing 2 fingers on her twisted left hand. There, the 3 of them knit together alive and become close, though unconventional family. While Mac's wealth, brains, and good humour have allowed him to carve out a niche in the town, his position as a gay man active in the civil rights movement exposed him to censure, harassment, and brutality. When the unscrupulous and charismatic Tony arrives as Mac's guest, he sets into motion a series of events that will shatter familial bonds and forever change Mem's life. Here now, Mem, as an adult, recounts the scars Tony left in her teenage years, confronting the culpability and the disastrous events of this final summer. Lots of parts of this converge to make this sound like an interesting book to me. The discussion of a queer man in the 1950s with the civil rights movement trying to make a place for himself, this divorcee and her disabled child or child with limb difference, all of these complicated dynamics in an environment that sounds like it might be quite conservative and quite sort of straight-laced, I think could be an interesting alternative family saga. So, okay, another translated book. October is the month for translation, it seems. This is Thirst, published on the 24th of October by Scribe. This is translated from the Spanish, and it says, across 2 time periods, 2 women confront fear, loneliness, mortality, and a haunting yearning that will not let them rest. In the 19th century, a vampire arrives from Europe to the coast of Buenos Aires on the run from the church. She must adapt, intermingle with humans, and be discreet. But in present-day Buenos Aires, a woman finds herself in an impasse when she grapples with her mum's terminal illness and her own relationship to motherhood. When she first encounters the vampire at the cemetery, something ignites within the 2 women as they cross a threshold for which there is no turning back. Here, Thirst plays with the boundaries of genre while exploring the limits of female agency, the consuming power of desire, and the fragile vitality of even the most immortal of creatures. Now, look, I'm not a vampire person. I'm not a spooky season person in general. But something about this being set in Argentina and that history and the discussion of the 2 timelines, the older timeline being set in the 19th century when we know sort of there was this period of church rule and the complications of religion and sort of the appearance of evil. This could lead to some really interesting commentary. So yes, that is Thirst. Let me know if you're more partial to a vampire read and if you'll be picking this up. Okay, Shred Sisters by Betsy Lerner is published by Grove Atlantic. This is a family saga talking about mental ill health. So it says, it is said that when one person in the family is unstable, the whole family is destabilized. Meet the Shreds. Olivia is the sister in the spotlight until her stunning confidence becomes erratic and unpredictable, a hurricane leaving people wrecked in its wake. Younger sister Amy, cautious and studious, believes in facts, proof, and empirical world. None of that explains what's happening to Olivia, whose beauty and her physical beauty and charisma mask mental illness that shatter Amy's carefully constructed life. As Amy comes of age seeks to find her place, first in the academics, then in New York publishing, through a series of troubled relationships, every step brings collisions with Olivia, who slips in and out of the Shred family without warning. Yet for all that threatens their sibling bond, Amy and Olivia reader cannot escape or deny the inextricable sister knot that binds them. Spanning 2 decades, looking at the complexities of sisterhood, mental illness, love and loss, and a journey to self-acceptance. I'm intrigued by this purely through the perspective of it being 2 sisters close in age growing up, and one struggling with mental illness, but our narrator being the sister who is more well, and that idea of what an impact it has on family. But I hope it's done with empathy and with it's conscientious of what those things can say about illness when we place the burden or we place the spotlight on the person who is not suffering. So I think the concept could be really interesting, and but I would be cautious, I guess, and I would look forward to seeing reviews of people who have experiences with the similar mental illness being discussed to be guided if it's an accurate or good representation. Okay, Jamie Attenberg has a new book out, A Reason to See You Again. I love the cover of this, and I've not read any of Jamie Attenberg's fiction books, but I know she's a pretty prolific fiction family saga writer, but I have read a couple of her non-fiction books, and I'm an avid sort of subscriber to her newsletter and read what she posts online, but I don't know why I haven't picked them up. But this follows a troubled mother and her 2 daughters through 40 years and a swiftly changing American landscape. The women of the Cohen family are in crisis, triggered by the death of their patriarch Rudy, the glue that held them together. Everyone's life is taking a dramatic turn. Shelley, the younger sister, runs off to the West Coast to immerse herself in the emerging and lucrative world of technology, and her sister Nancy gets married at 21 to a traveling salesman with a shady lifestyle. And Frida, the mother, hurls herself into a boozy, troubled existence in Miami, trying to forget the past even as it haunts her. They each learn in different ways that running away won't save you, and making life-altering decisions about what they want as a family and need to move forward. Set in the 1970s and spanning 40 years, taking the reader through a kaleidoscopic journey of motherhood, American workforce, tech, self-help, trauma, and the ever-evolving ways we communicate with one another. Oh, this sounds like the perfect weekend, cozy read that I could really settle in and get invested in. If you read this, or if you're looking forward to reading this, or if you read any of Janie Attenberg's previous novels, please let me know if there's a particular place I need to start. Okay, we have The Party by Tessa Hadley. I've only read a couple of Hadley's books, but again, she is a pretty prolific writer, and what I have read I've really enjoyed, and my mum is a big fan of hers. This is published at the end of the month on the 31st of October, and it's a short novella following, again, 2 sisters. We're having this month a theme of sisterhood, I'm feeling. This says, Evelyn has a surprising thought that bodies were sometimes wiser than the people inside them. She'd like to have impressed someone with this idea, but she couldn't explain it. On a winter Saturday night in the post-war Bristol, sisters Moira and Evelyn, on the cusp of adulthood, go to a student art party in the Dockside pub. They meet 2 men whose air of worldliness and sophistication intrigue and repel them. The men call a few days later to invite them to a grand suburban mansion Paul shares with his brother and sister. Moira accepts despite Evelyn's misgivings. As the night unfolds in a glamorous and unfamiliar setting, the sisters learn things about themselves that shock each other and release them into the new phase of their lives. Also, lots of books about the cusp of new adulthood, of coming of age, of emerging, which I think could be an interesting theme to get wrapped up in. So that's The Party. Okay, a book I've heard a lot of hustle about, and again, an author I'm bloody late to the party on. This is Our Evenings by Alan Hollinghurst, published on the 3rd by Picador, I believe. This, I think, is, or Pam Macmillan, sorry. This says, Dave Wynne is 13 years old when he first goes to stay with the Hadlows, the sponsors of his scholarship at a local boarding school where their son Giles is his contemporary. For Dave, this weekend with its games and challenges and surprising encounters open up heady possibilities, even as it exposes Giles's envy and violence. This book unfolds over half a century. The 2 boys' careers will diverge dramatically. Dave, a gifted actor, struggling with convention and discrimination. Giles, an increasingly powerful and dangerous politician. Our Evenings is Dave Wynne's own account of his life as a schoolboy, his love affairs in London, on the road with an experimental school theatre company, a late life affair, transforming his 60s into a new sense of happiness and perilous security. But on its own, it's also a moving story of his hard-working widowed mother, whose life takes unexpected turns as soon as her son leaves home. Dark and humorous, luminous and witty. A new novel gives us the portrait of modern England through a man's observed and often unnerving experiences, a story of race, class, theatre, sexuality, and the cruel shock of violence. So this is very much a cradle-to-grave novel. Looks like it's going to inspect the last 50 years in the UK. Occasionally, I find these books a little dry when we have a male protagonist. Call me biased, but sometimes I find it a little hard to swallow. But this does sound fascinating, and particularly the relationship, it sounds like, with class and power that comes into this, and I've only heard raves so far, so I know this is one my mum will definitely be reading, so I will wait for her review and then her copy. Okay, more translated books. I have The Trunk for You, published on the 17th by Transworld. I know I have a copy of this sitting for me back in the UK that was kindly sent. This story has already been picked up as an adaptation on Netflix. It's a feminist satire. It says, meet No, 30 years old, 5 wedding rings so far, but never once been in love. When Inji takes a job at Wedding and Life, a popular matchmaking service, she never imagines that her role will be with NM, their secret marriage division that rents out field spouses for a fixed period of time to their elite clientele. Just like a real marriage, Inji's assignments involve weddings, some sex, and a spot of housework, all tailored to the client's desires. No legal battles, fights, or emotional baggage here. In no way is Inji interested in finding real love, because when accidents happen, you mistakenly assume you are somehow special. But when one of her old husbands, a mysterious high-profile music producer, requests her back for an extra year of marriage, her own dark past begins to unravel, as well as the sinister underbelly of the NM management, who stop at nothing to preserve their reputation. I'm really intrigued about the blocks of truth this is based on. I know matchmaking services exist all around the world, and there's definitely a higher sort of system at play here. So I'm intrigued to know how much of this is based on reality, and it sounds like it's going to be thrilling and also inspecting of patriarchy and heteronormativity and all those other systems. So yeah, I think it will be great. Okay, we're on to some non-fiction now. My bum's gone numb. This is Building the Worlds That Kill Us, Disease, Death and Inequality in American History. This sounds like it might be a little chunky, but an important read nonetheless. It says it provides a new way of understanding the history of the United States through the colonial era to present. The authors demonstrate in that changing rates and kinds of illness reflect societal, political, and economic structures and the inequalities of race, class, and gender. These inequalities determine disparate health experiences of rich and poor, black and white, men and women, immigrant and native, boss and worker, indigenous and settler. Underscoring that powerful people and institutions have always seen some lives as more valuable than others, and emphasizes how those most affected by the disparities in disease rates and death have challenged and changed the system. This history shows unequal outcomes are a choice, and we can collectively make decisions to foster life and health. So yeah, this book is going to be about health justice. I imagine it's going to touch on the pandemic and also the AIDS crisis and women's health diseases and all those different disparities that we see. But I imagine it would be perhaps dry in places, but I'm sure fascinating too. Another book about health in a different kind of way. This is Every Kind of People, A Journey into the Heart of Care Work by Catherine Falk, published on the 24th by Penguin. This is a memoir by a care worker, and if you're not from the UK, although I'm sure it's similar in lots of places, we are in a care crisis. There is not enough carers, particularly post-Brexit, in the hostile immigration environment. A lot of our care work was undertaken by members of the immigrant community, and we're facing a crisis, and we have done for a long time, and so this book is about what it's like to be a carer in the current circumstances. It says Kate never expected to become a home care worker. She left a senior role in the NHS, burnt out and disheartened, and thought caring for people in their own homes would be a simpler job. Despite being determined not to become too involved with these customers, she found herself developing friendships, deep connections, and bearing witness to the extraordinary drama felt in ordinary lives. With energy, compassion, and clarity, this is the insight into the unsung and maligned profession, into the hidden lives of the housebound and the infirm. From Burrow, who screams like a banshee when Kate washes her, but collapses into giggles when her toes are tickled, to bawdy Mr. Radford, who promised to give him his me his car when he remembers where he left it. A clear-eyed view of the challenges facing the NHS and the crumbling care system, but a celebration of humanity and the life-changing impact of caring. Intrigued to know how, like, ethically this was written, in terms of like patient privacy and ensuring that you are representing everyone's humanity, not just the carers, including the clients. But it sounds like it could be a really important read, particularly for people who don't have first or second-hand experience of the care crisis. What is Mine, published by Fitzcarraldo, as you can see by the iconic white cover, by Jose Henrique Bortolucci, published on the 15th. And this is a look at Brazilian history, capitalism, and cancer. And knowing Fitzcarraldo, their authors seem to always manage to tie together these disparate themes into complex commentary on societal structures. And I imagine this is no different. It says, sociologist Jose Henrique uses interviews with his father, a truck driver Didi, to retrace the recent history of Brazil and of his family. From the mid-1960s to the mid-2010s, Didi worked as a truck driver, which took him away from home for long stretches as he crossed the country and participated in huge infrastructure projects, including the Trans-Amazonian Highway, a scheme spearheaded by the military dictatorship of the time, undertaken through brutal deforestation. An observer of history, Didi also accounts the toll the work has taken on his health, the heart attack in mid-age, the cancer that defined his retirement, weaving a history of nation and that of a man, uncovering the parallels between cancer and capitalism, sustained by expansion, embodiments of the gospel of growth at any cost, and tracing the distance that class has placed between him and his father. Influenced by authors like Annie Ernaux, a moving, thought-provoking and brilliantly constructed examination of the scars we carry as people and countries. I recently just read a novel set in Brazil, also about the dictatorship and the various political factions, that I really enjoyed, so I'd love to read a non-fiction book to pair with that, and this sounds like it would be a good fit. Okay, this book I heard about through one of my favourite podcasts called Whale Hunting, which I believe I've spoken about to you guys and definitely speak about fairly often on my Patreon, because they had the author Gareth Gore on. This is Opus, and the byline is A Cult of Dark Money, Human Trafficking and Right-Wing Conspiracy Inside a Catholic Church. This sounds fascinating. The podcast episode was brilliant and intrigued me enough to want to pick this up. I just hope it comes out on audio. This is published by Simon & Schuster in the US. I couldn't find a UK listing for it yet, but I'm sure it's somewhere. This is an expose on Banco Popular. It starts with Banco Popular, which is a Spanish bank that went bust in 2017, collapsing overnight. And Gareth Gore was dispatched to report on the story as a business journalist, but expects to find another case of unbridled capitalism gone wrong, but uncovered 2 decades of deception that hid one of the most brazen cases of corporate pillaging in history, perpetuated by a group of men sworn to celibacy and self-flagellation, who secretly control Popular Bank and abuse their positions to spread Opus Dei in every corner of the world. Drawing on unparalleled access to bank records, insider accounts, and exclusive interviews from whistleblowers within Opus Dei, revealing how money from the bank was used to lure unsuspecting unsuspecting recruits, some of them children, into a life of servitude, tracking the ascent of Opus Dei in the US and revealing its role in bankrolling many right-wing causes, including the overturning of Roe versus Wade. In an era of disinformation and deep fakes, here is a real-life conspiracy hidden in plain sight. So just to explain quickly, Opus Dei is a official arm of the Catholic Church. The current Pope Francis, has explicit knowledge of Opus Dei, and although is trying to rein in its power, has not disbanded it yet. It is a ultra-conservative group of both everyday people and high-powered people in positions like politics who pledge this ultra-extreme version of Catholicism, like it mentions, including celibacy, and there's a financial element to try and forward the message of re-Christianizing the world, and it has its foothold in so many different countries. And this book, I think, is just the start of uncovering it, so I'm so excited to read Opus. Okay, a non-fiction book about writing published by FSG in the States on the 15th is Lingua File, A Life of Language Love. That's a tongue twister. It says, if there's one feature that defines the human condition, it is language, spoken, written, signed, understood, misunderstood in all its infinite glory. In this ingenious lyrical exploration, Julie Sadivi draws on years of experience in the lab and a lifetime of linguistic love to bring together the discoveries of linguistics home to the place of language where it lives itself, with years of yearning for the human heart and amidst complex social bonds that make it possible. This follows the path that language takes through human life, from the infant's first attempts at sense-making to the vulnerabilities of loss accompanied with aging, showing that language and life are inextricable and offers them together. A childish misunderstanding of her mother's meaning reveals difficulty in relating to other minds. A frustrating with professional communication styles exposes the labyrinth of standards that define success and the first signs of hearing loss that lead to a meditation on society's discomfort with physical and mental limitations. Part memoir, cultural commentary, and scientific exploration. I love books about words. But often they can be quite dry, but this one sounds like it's going to bring forward the author's personal experiences, which I always find fascinating. And yeah, I have a new book by Stanley Tucci, which is, I think, joyful for many. I still haven't listened to Taste on audio. Tell me why. This is What I Ate in 1 Year. This is a record of 12 months of eating in restaurants, kitchens, film sets, press junkets, home and abroad, with friends, family, strangers, and occasionally just by himself. From the mouth-wateringly memorable to the comfortingly domestic to the infuriously inedible. The meals memorialized in this diary are a prism to reflect on the way his life, his family are constantly evolving. Through the food, he marks and mourns the passing of time, the loss of loved ones, and steeling himself for what's to come. I think this could be so joyful and comforting and beautiful and soft and generous, and I love books about food and from people who really love to eat, and Stanley Tucci is one of them. So one to add to my Christmas list, and one I think will be gifted plenty. And speaking of one I will also be buying as a gift that's Foodie is A Thousand Feasts by Nigel Slater, a memoir of sorts. My mum is a huge Nigel Slater fan. I'm sure lots of your mums are too. So I think this will be beautiful. A lyrical and meditative volume of treasured memories and observations, filling countless notebooks and diaries with odes to everyday pleasures, the details of a life lived mostly in the kitchen, but also time spent in the garden, on trains and planes, at home and away, a view of snowdrops under gnarled branches of an oak tree, and the first letters on the crisp pages of a new diary, a battered wicker basket of dumplings fresh from the steamer, the warmth and purpose found everywhere in a world that feels dark and unforgiving. Nigel Slater has always had a narrative bend to his cookbooks, and he's not afraid of writing those sort of long passages that are often satirized and mocked in sort of recipe blog, where you want to just get to the point, but he has such a beautiful way with words. So I think this will be wonderful. That's it. That's all the books I have for you in October. Let me know if any of these are interesting to you, which ones you have read, which ones you'll be picking up, and I would love to hear in the comments. And I will see you all in the next one. Bye.